Hey, welcome to the DNA podcast. So glad you joined us. Honored you would take the time to listen to us. We just want to do the best we can to add value to your life, stand with you in the vision that God's called you, maybe provide some perspectives of some things maybe you've heard discussed before, but possibly today we're going to provide some perspectives that will bless you maybe in the season that you're in. And today we're going to be talking about leading with vision. And one reason I think that's appropriate is because over the last few podcasts, we've been talking about, prophetic vision, how we take a word from God and strategize around that. And the thing about vision, we all know the famous passage in Proverbs, without a vision, people perish. But here's what I believe about vision. Vision isn't something we decide and ask God to bless. Vision is something we have to discern what the Lord's saying and then simply say yes. But then once we say yes, we have to walk out that vision, lead our teams, our staff, our volunteers in the context of that vision. And today I am really honored and excited to have two incredible guests, both of when I thought about leading with vision. These are probably two of the first two people that came to my mind. And so first I want to introduce to you Pastor Lonnie Johns, who pastors Christ Central in Lake City, Florida. He started that church with his wife Tammy in 1998, and God has blessed them tremendously as he has led with vision. They have multiple outreaches in that city that include Renewed Outreach Center. It includes a sports ministry that they have for the young people for really all of their county. And they have football programs and soccer programs where kids come right on the campus of Christ Central. Pastor Lonnie, it is an incredible honor to have you with us at the DNA podcast today.
Well, I'm honored to be here, Ryan. It's always great to be with you and with the Destiny family, and we're just looking forward to what God does today. But thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. And along with him, we have Pastor John Teele, who, along with his wife, planted Voyage Church in Pace, Florida in 2022. And what God has done there in really 4 short years is absolutely amazing. Obviously, God's in this thing, but whatever God's in also requires leaders to steward wisely the vision that he's given him. And I believe John has done that in an incredible fashion. John, incredibly honored that you're with us today.
Well, thank you. And I'm honored to be here. Honestly, look up to both of you, and I'm still learning a lot. So God's hand is on what's happening, but I'm excited to learn as well.
Yeah, well, the reality is as leaders, if we ever stop learning, that's probably when we start dying. So hopefully we're all still in that place of continuing to learn. Let's talk about vision for just a minute. Pastor Lonnie, I'd like to start with you. What does it mean to you? Because I think when we talk about leading with vision, everybody might have a different context or maybe a little bit nuanced ideas of what it means. But what does it mean to you to lead with vision in the context of church leadership, and how's that shaped what's happened there in Lake City?
Yeah, I think that God speaks to different guys in different ways, and I think we all have kind of an assignment on our life. And so, vision is manifested different, I believe, based on the region, based on the chemistry of teams and all of those things. But I think that it's got to be a divine communication. You got to have a word. We talk about presence driven, and part of that being presence driven is having an ear to hear what God's saying and an eye to see the prophetic direction that God's leading us in. And so I think that that's part of where a pastor has to have vision, because we don't have fresh vision, and it's not something you just get when you launch a church. It's something that you have to continue to lean into, because if not, then you just move into a maintenance mode. And then you just become, instead of a fisher of men, a maintenance guy for the aquarium, and that's not what God called us to do.
So good, John. When I say leading with vision, what's your context of that? What comes to mind for you?
Oh man, that you've heard the Lord. I've always said, especially what we're doing the past 4 years, we wouldn't be doing it because we thought it was a good idea. It was, the vision comes because you're just going to obey God, and that if God calls you to something, even when a lot of times people ask us right now, like, what's the vision for the next 5 years? And I'm like, man, I'm trying to get it for next week sometimes. But what I know is that we're going to be close to him. And, our statement for our church is just hosting his presence and hosting his people. And when we're close to him, we've really turned up this past year and just having times of prayer as a body. And man, if I stay close to him, like I'm not going to miss it. And I think that's one of the most encouraging things my wife said one time. She's like, John, if we stay close to him, we can't miss it. And so vision for us, yes, there's the casting and communicating and getting people in the right place. And, sometimes helping someone see what they can't see, but you've already seen it. But I think is staying close to him, making sure our team's staying close to him. So then whatever God drops, man, we can carry. We joked yesterday in staff and said we're in the spot where we're having to figure out potentially another service. And I was reading in Genesis where it says God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep. I said, man, God caused this. I said, but we've got to carry it. And so staying close to him and, doing what he says.
So just by way of giving a story, because I think that helps to enlighten people about how vision comes, can you just tell a little bit, briefly, talk, John, about how you got vision? Like how did it become clear to you that God had called you and Shauna to plant a church in Pace, Florida?
Yeah. Well, we were in a season of ministry that transitioned unexpectedly, and it was difficult and not to anyone's fault, but just transition and, seasons change. And so when that happened, it actually kind of I was out of ministry, and the Lord specifically told me, don't apply for any ministry position. So I went into a season of painting houses, and it was just a very strange season. For 6 months, we just had our first kid, and that was really wild, some stuff that happened in the midst of giving birth. And so I remember we were driving our car and just really thinking about like what's next. And Shauna was in the back seat like the wife does for the first kid, because you drive like, oh my gosh, anything could happen. And she just got this word, voyage, which means a long and extended journey. And she was like, that's it. If we plant a church, it'll be around that idea. And for us, and I've been in ministry long enough now, and you guys know this, man, your heart aches when you see people walk away, when you see someone who's tasted and seen and they step away. And so Voyage for us, the vision was just, man, I know I can't control what people do, but God, could you help us lead something where people would say yes all the days of their life? That whether they stay at our church or not, that's irrelevant, that they stay on the voyage of following Jesus. So that was really the heart of it. God sent us into a season of another 5 years of youth and young adult ministry. And through that, really learning what it looks like I'd never been a part of something mobile, and obviously that's what we do now, so I'm thankful for those 5 years. But yeah, I would say the vision came from that place of, man, we want to see people say yes all the days of their life. And so God teach us how to disciple people, equip people in such a way. And that 5 years prior of being in a mobile context helped us realize that excellence, if you want to call it, has nothing to do with what you have or the space, but it has to do with who you host. And we did it in a warehouse, 96 degrees all summer long. I played drums every Wednesday and preached every Wednesday, but it gets that thing in you where it's just like, we can't stop, won't stop. We'll do whatever it takes, to co-labor with Christ. And so, yeah, the vision, I would say that's why I'm a lot of times sitting with you guys intimidated, because, man, vision for us is just, we keep it simple, and I just want to see people stay on the voyage of following Jesus.
But that is the vision God's given you, right? So yeah. I think that's a unique thing, and something that it's worth noting is that we can never compare the vision God's given us to somebody else, how it came or what it looks like, because really the mark of our leadership is about our obedience and our following Christ, who then leads us into the vision that he has for us. And so I just think it's huge, John, that you've recognized that, and you're like, I'm gonna do what God's calling me to do. I'm gonna stay in my lane. And, there's other things he might call you to do in the future, but right now this is it, and that's what you've set your sights on. I think that's huge. Yeah. I think that's huge. So, Pastor Lonnie, were you wanting to add something there?
Well, I was just saying, vision's progressive.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are foundationals that everything's built on. We're built on the presence of God. So regardless of what we do or how we manifest what God's calling us to do, the presence is the priority, right? His word, his presence, and vision comes out of that. I think a lot of guys start churches with a great vision, And I think that many times the vision of what you do or what God's calling you to do can get stagnant. And the key for us, I think for any leader, is to stay fresh in the passion for God's presence, because out of that passion for presence, fresh vision, God's always releasing vision. And so I think we have to be intentional to cast vision, because vision has so many benefits to the people. It talks about without vision, people perish or wander. Mm-hmm. And it's so true. Passion, it's through ministry is really the toughest leadership there is, because what we have to do is our currency is inspiration. They have to catch the vision. And if you're on a job, they're working for a paycheck. But for us, we have to cast vision with passion that then God seals it and touches their heart to then gather a community of believers to then make a difference. And it's got to be greater than us just gathering and, singing Kumbaya and experiencing his presence. We're called to make a difference in the world. And so I think, the test of vision is longevity. Vision leaks, mm-hmm. And part of the critical, I think, component of a leader is to continue to cast fresh vision over a long period of time, but build on that foundation. So what never changes? What we do may change from season to season as God leads us, but the priority of his presence, the priority of his word, the love for the fellowship and love for the lost, those are things that have got to be built into the DNA or the culture of that community, because vision has to be this lifeblood of kingdom life, but then also the assignment for this community. And so you can go and you get inspired by other people, but you've also got to make sure that God's vision for you in the house you're leading is to do that. Because I've seen a lot of great things, but I didn't feel that was what we were called to do. And I think that when a leader has to realize God puts people to sharpen us, iron sharpens iron, but you can't just copy and paste vision. No. Right. Vision comes down to an individual relationship with God and the assignment that he's given that person for that place. God is a very individual, personal God, and he's really, and I think Bishop used to say it, he's a zip code God. Mm-hmm. So there's needs that are unique in each geographical area, and he's got a word not only for nations, not only for the world, but he's got a word and an instruction for regions to begin to bring kingdom solutions to real secular problems. Mm-hmm. And the voice and the window into the kingdom is the people of God. And that's part of what gives God such credibility in areas in the people of God. When the problems that can't be fixed through secular means, a church gets a word from God, rallies people to come around the vision, and then a solution that is not being solved, or they don't know how to do it, and then God sends a solution. You see it in Scripture. Nobody can interpret the dream. And you see it. Where do they find it? Well, they have to find it from a guy in prison with Joseph, or they have to go and talk to Daniel, because the solution is escaping, and then God, through a vision, a dream, a prophetic word, brings solution to secular problems that then God, the God of that people, gets raised up and becomes this solution that now people come to the people of God to talk about problems, because it seems that they have solutions. And it's all to bring glory to God. It's all to point that he's our source. Like Daniel said, when Pharaoh asked him, he's like, can you interpret the dream? He said, I don't know what it means, but I have a God mm-hmm. who does. Mm-hmm. Let me pray for a while. Let me get a revelation. Let me get a fresh vision of what this is. And so I think, those principles in Scripture are something that we have to manifest in the 21st century, because God's not changed. He still chooses to speak to people, and he still chooses to lead people. And I think that that's what's so important and vital and critical in a local body, is to have a fresh revelation, fresh vision, fresh word. We thank God for Logos, but we need Rhema, because if not, then we'll just begin to get into doing what we've always done. And when we do what we all done, so what God told us to do in one season may shift, and we'll still be doing. You know, when David went and got the Ark of the Covenant, there were still people meeting in Gibeon and worshiping, and the presence of God wasn't there, but they kept going through the thing. He had moved it to Zion. So I want to go where God's going. Mm-hmm. So that's why there's a season where, you know, you have to refine vision. You have to, sometimes there's a season that you have to kill a program. It's over. It had a season. There's a time of launching. And so I think that to have a vibrant body, there has to be fresh revelation. That's why we have Vision Sundays every year. And we also have Reflection Sundays. Why? Because it's in the lifeblood, the DNA of our church.
Yeah, so good.
I would just want to tag on that. The progressive thing where you said vision is progressive, that resonates with us because we're so young. And we're in a region, like I've never lived here. So, man, I remember those first several months. I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning with my son and putting him in the car to let my wife sleep some and just drive the land and just pray. Mm-hmm. Because I need eyes to see and ears to hear. But that progressive thing makes a lot of sense. My wife said it this way. She's like, John, I think the first 5 years we're going to be getting culture established. And it might have been Bishop who said this. I only heard him speak live once, but culture is the oxygen to vision. And that you could have the greatest vision in the world, but if the culture's not healthy, right, it's toxic and the vision won't come to pass. And so I see things that I've been to both of y'all's churches and walk in and, you know, inspired, but knowing that there's also been groundwork of culture laid. And so if any younger guys are watching this, I would just say, man, you focus on the culture, and that's what we're doing right now. And I think there's really exciting things that we look at ahead, but I think they'll be possible because the culture is healthy.
That's so good. I think I love the perspective we're getting because we're getting perspective from Pastor Lonnie, who started a church in '98, just thriving, and we're getting perspective from Pastor John, who just planted a church 4 years ago, but yet God's blessing it. And I love the fact that you're just willing to say, basically, we're just following Christ. We're going to allow that vision to be progressively revealed. And I just think that's so vital. And again, so important for young leaders to hear, people that are planting churches. And I think what you said about getting into this place that you had never lived before is because the vision God had given you had to be contextualized into the culture of the community that God had planted. It might have looked different ways if you would have stayed where you were before, right? Because there was a different context. But now you've moved to this context of Pace, Florida, and thank God you had the wisdom to say, I don't know anything about this place. We got to figure it out. But the way we're going to figure it out isn't always by, you know, all the data and research. It's by God. Right. You got to tell us how now to express this word that you've given it. How do we live that out in this place? One more thing just about culture. This podcast isn't for me to talk. It's really more to hear you talk, but you reminded me of something. I have this metaphor that I've used to compare vision and culture. And vision is really a word from God. And what is a word from God? It's a seed, right? That's planted in our hearts. We have that the story of the parable of the sower. And but what a seed needs is good soil. Yeah. And the culture of the church is really the soil. We can have a great word from God, but if we don't tend to the soil, to the culture of the church, we'll have a great vision that will never take and produce fruit. I think it's Sam Chan that says it this way: culture trumps vision every time, right? Yeah. So I just think that's really a great, important thing to remember as we talk about vision here. Yeah, so good.
Yeah. Can I just interject? Absolutely. One of the things I think it's helped me is I believe, and I share this with young leaders, that because a lot of them get so enamored with vision that they neglect culture. Mm-hmm. And the thing about vision is a seed, just like you said, but vision, I look at it as a seed, but culture's the womb. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we have vision, but the womb is not healthy, so it aborts the vision. Mm-hmm. It'll abort the seed because it is not going to produce and grow. And so part of what we have to realize is, as much we need to hear from God about vision, we need to hear from God to create the culture, the womb, to carry the seed that is going to grow. You know, it's about doing what God says. And God is a progressive. You know, his first original blessing in Genesis 1:11, what did he start saying? He said to what he created, started with trees and seed. He said, be fruitful and multiply. Then he said it to the animals, the whales and the fish, and then he said it to the mammals. Then he said it to man, be fruitful and multiply. In other words, God is a God of increase.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the world will teach you that things going to always go through cycles. So you're going to grow, then you're going to have really hard times, and you're going to lack, and you're going to, you know, and I understand that happens. But what God's talking about is the seed is in the fruit. And so when a ministry understands vision and then begins to bear fruit, because many churches, even with good original vision, which is what? Presence. It's about the word. It's about worship. Incredible. But they don't have a heart for outside. So then they become a closed group. Yeah. And so they're just worrying about having great services and yet not carrying kingdom assignments. Yeah. And when you do that, you can have incredible services. God can speak. But if you're not taking it out and doing the other part of the kingdom work, then you become limited. Because He wants us to be fruitful and multiply. The early church exploded because there were vision to go outside. Yeah. And so a priority is the presence of God. Let me tell you what else a priority is: people. Yeah. And so if we don't let vision expand, you got to start creating the culture, but the culture has got to have an evangelistic, apostolic thrust in it to carry out the presence of God, to carry it out to all the lands, right? To all nations, all tribes, and you start in your community. So I think when we look at vision, there's a lot of components, and it is progressive. And I shared with John, I've had the honor of being on his board since we began and since he began it. And I've talked to him about, you know, you're going to go through progressional growth brings problems, and then we need God's wisdom to solve the problems, because you can have a church of 1,000 or 1,200 or 1,400, but the reality it's still 5 years old. And what does that mean? I said, this is a baby. It's a big baby. It's like a shack baby. I always tell him, this is a big baby. It's got great potential, but God's got to give you the wisdom to build this infrastructure in the culture, because one thing about explosive growth is sometimes the culture you start can get overwhelmed by too many people coming in that don't carry the culture. Mm-hmm. Yep. So there has to be a protection of culture, that it doesn't get hijacked in the process of explosive growth. So you got to guard the culture to carry the vision, and then God will give you the people and all those kind of things. But anyway.
And that is exactly, I literally shared the same thing to the team the other day. I was like, guys, we had a group of people who had the culture. The growth happens so quickly that we have bodies, but they're not, that DNA is not in them yet. And so you got those stress points and all those different things. And so I did a teaching with our staff 2 weeks ago. There is no such thing of a vision without conflict. And I just talked to them, hey, you're going to have to be able to have healthy, godly, spirit-filled conflict, the tough conversations. Let people know, hey, we don't talk that way. That's not how we carry ourselves. That's not how we walk. And it's grueling. And I told him, I said, I know not everybody's personality loves it. I was like, but I've fallen in love with the conversations that are conflict for the sake of culture, because I'm a peacemaker, not a peacekeeper. Yeah. And that stuff, Pastor Lonnie, and I would just say, when you talk about the vision to impact the community, I'm always inspired by you with that. And we've just kind of made a statement. We've got someone on staff now helping with outreach, which is a huge blessing, because when it's volunteer-based, you know, you can only run at a certain pace. But we've said we're not just a church that meets in the city, but we meet the needs of the city. And so we've just started asking our city, like, what are those needs, finding those things. And okay, God, how do you want us to partner with someone who's already doing it? Or does a fresh thing need to be kicked off, you know, a ministry we need to carry? So we're in the midst of that right now.
Yeah, that's really good. I think oftentimes when I talk about vision to our church, I remind them that greater than the vision of the things that we do is embracing a vision to become the people that God's called us to be. And my perspective is that's really what builds the culture around why core values, I think, are important, not just things to have on the wall, but to constantly say, okay, when those tension points come of vision, when the stress points come, are we addressing them from the place of our values and the culture that we're going to bring. And when we have those difficult conversations with people, we're willing to confront them. It's on the basis of, hey, I'm not addressing your behavior. I'm just pointing out that the way you're showing up is counter to the culture that we're creating here because of the core values we have. And we continually then invite people back into those core values, because when that growth happens, man, you can't afford to let things come into the culture that are going to ultimately be toxins to to the seed of that vision. So yeah, so good. We probably got time on this podcast for maybe one more question. And let me just ask this. Obviously, vision can feel really exciting at the beginning, especially a new initiative, things God's called us to do. What does it take to sustain that vision over the years through challenging seasons? Pastor Lonnie?
I think just the component of the vision that you've already been doing needs to be married with a fresh word, and that needs to happen. You need to reinforce vision during the year, but for us, we have times where I'm preaching intentionally, revisiting different points of vision from our Vision Sunday in January. We have a fast. I really believe it builds a spiritual sensitivity and also a spiritual momentum to receive the word. So we have a 21-day fast, and then the last Sunday of January is our Vision Sunday, and I will share vision. And I take from Habakkuk 2, where it says, write the vision, make it plain, that they may read it and run with it. And so we write down the vision. It's broken into 4 different areas: global, national, local, and then household of faith. And those are all specific vision goals or things that we feel like God is pressing us into. I think it's very important for us and for how my mind works is we need to write it down to bring unity and clarity, to bring a prayer purpose. So I give everyone a copy. So everyone gets a copy of vision to put on their fridge. And then every year before Vision Sunday, we have a reflection Sunday. And on that, I go back over the goals and say, let's look at what God's done. Because if we're not careful, we always are vision oriented, but then we don't hold ourselves accountable to vision, and we don't always celebrate what God's done. And so for us, we're very intentional about then coming back and saying, here's what God did last year. And so it has been progressive. It grows every year. And for people to see their volunteer hours, their giving, their faithfulness to the vision, that is inspiring, especially when they've been fasting and they see it, we celebrate together. And then it builds the faith for the fresh vision, which has ministry points that are continuation, whether it's an outreach center, a homeless shelter, addiction training place that we have, the ministry. We started a school 3 years ago. It's exploding. We've got 200 kids right now. We're right now in the process of building 12 new classrooms, gutting our youth room. We had 5 days. We opened it up for new enrollments for next year, and we have 87 in 5 days. We only have 150 spots. We're believing that we're going to have 300 to 300, maybe more, this next year. And then we'll do the secondary grades, and we'll be able to add another 100. So in 5 years, we should have 400 students or more. We'll have a capacity of 600, but we're believing for that. But part of that is the vision is progressive. So we celebrate what God's done. And so we had 10,522 nights of shelter for homeless people in our homeless shelter and our transition housing. We fed over 10,000 boxes of food and over 8,000 hot meals to homeless, and gave them opportunity of showers that are not in the shelter. Those kind of ministries, you got to come back and you got to hold yourself accountable, because I think many ministers, we are great at giving vision, but when vision doesn't happen like we thought, then we just move on to something else, and the people are like, but we're moving on, but what about what we talked about? What happened? Yeah. And so I think because it's uncomfortable sometimes, because we've done this for 28 years. I've had Vision Sundays for 28 years, and there's some years I got up and said, we did this, God did this, God did this, God did this. We didn't get this done. I know I said that I felt like this was God, and I still do, but we didn't get it done this year. But we're still rolling this over, and we're going to move into it. Or you start a ministry like an assisted living, where we had, we grew from a 10-bed facility to 72 beds. We went from 1 tithe bed to 8 tithe beds. And we, had 50 employees, and we gave away $1.3 million of free health care to elderly. And then certain things come after 17 years, and God was telling me to shut it down. And so I have to come. See, leadership is not easy. And so because it's in the transition season, when God shifts and moves, we got to be bold enough. And I think that many times leaders start things God tells them, and then when God tells them it's time to move, struggle with shutting it down because of appearances. Yeah. And so then here's the thing we've got to realize: when God moves, if you try to stay there, the favor's off of it, and now you're going to have to maintain it in the flesh. Because, and what I have found is that when God speaks it, if I do it, supernatural provision, supernatural doors open. If I try to keep things going or start things that God hadn't said, I can see the difference in the favor. Yeah. So it makes me be very sensitive to pray hard to get not only the vision, but then the process, the wisdom. What did he tell Solomon? Solomon said, okay, I'm king. That's great. I've been wanting to be king, but now I have to actually do king stuff. And I can't do it. I don't have enough wisdom. God, I need wisdom. And I think we as leaders have to be careful that we don't either lead by fear of failure, fear of appearances, or we get to a point where we're only doing things we feel safe to do. Mm-hmm. I can put this down because I know we can do it. Well, where's that faith? I think that one of the things I have found is that I'm just transparent with the congregation. And I've got up and said, because God gave me a word, and I said, hey, man, here's what God told me to put on Vision Sunday. This is part of our vision for the local community. But I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know how we're going to do it. We ain't got the money or the people for this, but here's what God's saying. So I'm just throwing it out there. So help me pray into it. And then within 10 days, business guys that don't even go to our church show up and fund it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we step into it. And then I come back and said, this is why we know God's in stuff. Yeah. Because we couldn't do this. Yeah. This is God thing. I can't get credit. You can't get credit. This is God's church, God's ministry. And if we just follow the Spirit, if we just lean into the Word, the Word, what did he say? Be fruitful and multiplies. If he gives us a seed, many times the seed is the vision. Yeah. We wrap it in faith, and we gotta what? We gotta release it. But if we are intimidated to release a seed or a word because we can't figure out, going through our filter of our budget or our people, how it would happen, we're missing those God moments.
Yeah. So good. So
right.
Good.
So the thing is that I'm just saying, and I try to encourage young pastors, be bold in your faith, be bold in your leadership. Being a leader, don't think you have to be perfect. Don't think you got to get everything right. You're going to miss it, and especially if you're really trying to lean into faith, because sometimes, and I've shared this before. I bought a piece of property and tied up hundreds of thousands of dollars because God told me to buy it in prayer, and I knew He told me to buy it. I bought it, and then I went and got architects, drew out all we were going to build on it, because I felt like this was what God wanted to do with it. And then all of it fell apart. And then I'm asking God, what in the world? I went out here, now everybody, my elders and everybody, we said, this is what God is saying. And he said, I never told you what to do with it. You figured out what to do with it. I told you to buy it. Right. And then 18 months later, I had to move on, and I didn't want to sell it to the guy who wanted it because he is the one who shot down. He was a developer, and he shot down what we were trying to do with it in ministry. And then one morning in prayer, God said, sell it. And so we paid $265,000, and we sold it 2 years later for $1.2 million. And that fund, that seed, was for the funding and expansion of the ALF and other ministries. But God said, that was my plan. Don't get ahead of me, son. Don't get ahead of me.
You know what I hear you saying, Pastor Lonnie, is I hear you saying this: if we're going to lead with vision, we have to lead from presence.
You got to lead from
We
presence.
have to lead from presence. That's so powerful. And one thing you said there, and here's the way I wrote it down in my notes, because you were talking about stopping the ALF and what a challenge, that presents in our mind and understanding. Because so many times we think of vision as starting something and doing something, and we never consider that sometimes God's vision is about us stopping something. So I have a question about that, but let me tell you, it's going to hang on till the next episode of the DNA podcast. So if you've been watching this and you're curious, what is this about vision that would stop something, then you need to tune in to the next episode of the DNA podcast. And if this has been a blessing to you, would you do me a favor? Would you like it? Would you follow us? Maybe share it with somebody you feel to be a blessing to. And we want you to know that at Destiny Network and at the DNA podcast, we're standing with you. We believe in what God's called you to do, and it'd be our honor to stand with you and see God's vision for your life and your ministry be fulfilled.